Good evening, folks. Good evening. Good day to you. Thanks for tuning in. I've got time on my hands yet. I'm still in the process of trying to go back to work. And I haven't gone back yet. Granted, I am retired Army. But I want to go back to work, so. But for right now, I've got time on my hands, and I listed things, story topics, quite a few of them. And this was one that I thought for the past week I'd just rehash my childhood hauntings. For those of you that follow my channel, I've got a lot of stories about God, His angels, and God's work in my life and God's instruction in my life. Just like you, I'm not saying I'm anything special, but just I like to talk about how God's worked in my life. But I've also have, as you know, a lot of ghost stories and other things. Some of them, I don't know, ghost is formerly human, demonic is something else. A few of those. Just strange stuff, some things, some psychic. But not much has been going on in my life lately. Not much at all. Doing housework, working on the lawn, practicing my music. I hope to present Bach's Prelude in D minor pretty soon on guitar. I've got it down, I just need to polish it up a little bit. There are a few parts in that tune that are real finger twisters. So, I don't know why I wanted to tell these stories. But I think it's because I was explaining to somebody I know off of, not on YouTube, but like I do know a few people I talk to, believe it or not. Face to face sometimes or over the telephone. And I was trying to explain to them that these spirit stories, they've been going on my entire life since earliest memory. And so I was thinking about that because I actually have a pretty good memory that goes all the way back till maybe age 2 or 3. I can remember some things very well. And I remember a few creepy things that were happening, ghosts, definitely hauntings. And then I think some of these, if you've been listening to my entire channel, you've heard a few of these. So I might be rehashing 1 or 2 of these. And then just some Tim Blab, because quite frankly, I'm bored and lonely. And this is my company and something for me to do. So, it is what it is. So my earliest haunting memory, I must have been maybe 2 or 3. And we lived in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And I just remember a small bed that was my bed, and the room, I can still see it. And for a while, I was waking up every night. I think I can still remember it. I don't even think I'd gone to sleep. But my mom would take me, tuck me in and all that, and we'd say prayers or whatever, I'm pretty sure my mom did all that. She was really good about that. She was a wonderful mother. And turned the lights out. And I really didn't have any preconcepts of evil or anything like that. Like the world was brand new and innocent. But I remember every night for a while. It seemed like it went on for maybe a couple weeks. I'm just saying what I remember. That I'd wake up and there was a woman standing, a tall woman, in a white gown, standing at the foot of my bed, just looking at me. I think it might have been my grandmother, who was very close to me. And we were in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and when she died, she was in Virginia, which is my home state, Northern Virginia, up around Fredericksburg. But I was told, my mom used to tell me that I was very close to her mother, Hatha Bays Wooten. Um, and that even though she was in Virginia and I was in Albuquerque, New Mexico, my mom used to tell me that the moment that she died, that they got the phone call that my grandmother had passed away, I changed. She said I became a different person. It was I used to laugh a lot. I was very giggly, fat little giggly baby, you know, honestly. I don't know if I can find a baby picture. I've got them of me on. If I can find one, I'll put it up. If not, I'm not. I'll see if I can find one. But I don't know if I can. I don't know where they're at. I was a butterball when I was a baby and laughed a lot. And when my grandmother died, I became very quiet and very sullen. So much that my mother was afraid that something had happened to me, that there was something wrong with me. She took me to see the doctor, which was back then, I'm talking like early 60s. You know, the doctors knew you. They were like a friend of the family. You know, oh, hello. You know what I mean? Medicine wasn't as advanced by a long shot back then, but your doctor knew you. You know? And the doctor was even, she used to tell me a story. That a doctor picked me up and I was very quiet, very serious. I had changed. I became a different person. That I went from a happy, giggly, bubbly baby to very sullen, very, very downcast, serious, quiet. And even the doctor remarked that he's changed. And they didn't know what it was. So I remember waking up every night and there was a woman, and she was an older, like a middle-aged woman. I think it might have been like I said, my grandmother, because she was tall. I always wondered, I'm like 6 foot and my brother's 6'1" or 6'2", which isn't tall. It's not like basketball player tall, but everybody else in my family, they're lucky if they're 5'10". Who's a tall one? My grandmother. She had broad shoulders and a tall woman, Hatha. And it bothered me. I mean, I sensed she wasn't doing anything frightful, and I didn't get a negative vibe. It was just unnatural. I think at first I was just looking at her, and she'd just be standing at the foot of my bed, staring at me. She didn't say or do anything. She just stood there and looked at me in a white dress, a shadowy woman. And it started bothering me because this was going on every night. And I think I used to cry out till my mom would come, and the woman, of course, she'd vanish. And I was telling my mother about this woman. And this went on for a while. I think my mother didn't take me serious at first, but then she started to take me serious. And I'm not sure. My mother did something. I think she prayed about it. But something happened that just stopped. The woman stopped visiting me. And, you know, I really believe it was my grandmother, and whom I don't cognizantly remember her. Because I think I was like 2 or 3 when she died. And but I know, you know, an odd thing, when I was a paratrooper in the Army, and I lived on post housing. There's a flash forward past my childhood. Something happened with my grandmother. I can't explain it. Whom I hadn't seen since I was in diapers, or just out of diapers, since I was a toddler. And I was at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, married then with kids. My kids were very little. And I had on-post housing that was real close to my Army barracks. Honestly, I could walk home from my barracks in 10 minutes. And when we were out in the field, we were out in the field, or we were overseas doing something, I was gone. But when we were in what you call garrison, when you're in garrison in the Army, that means you're not in the field. You show up in the morning at 6 in the morning, you run, you do PT. Usually you're done at 7. They give you from 7 to 8 to get cleaned up, personal hygiene, get dressed, get your uniform together, show up at Oh, I forgot. They give you like an hour for breakfast too. So you had like 2 hours to get cleaned up and eat chow at the barracks or whatever you're going to do for breakfast. Usually 8 or 9 o'clock. I guess 8 o'clock. There'd be a formation where you're standing out there and they'd open ranks march and blah blah blah. Where am I going with this? You're in garrison, and then you're doing things. You're cleaning rifles, cleaning the barracks, maybe pulling guard duty. You're doing something besides doing things in the woods, playing army. But so I was in garrison. This has to do with my grandmother, and it was lunchtime, and I went home. I walked home for lunch because I could do that. And I usually had an hour. So I go home for lunch. And I don't know where my wife and kids, they weren't there. They were doing something. But all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I just started weeping. And I was bewildered, like, why am I weeping? Now, granted, I'm a corporal in the Army, the 82nd Airborne, 504th Parachute Infantry Regiment. Charlie Company, to be exact. Charlie Company, 2nd 504. Great unit. My Army alma mater, 82nd Airborne. And I'm weeping hard. And I'm like, what's wrong? It just came across me real sudden as I'm home going to eat some lunch. And I hadn't been thinking of my grandmother for years because I didn't know her. I don't remember her. But I said, I miss Grandma. It's Grandma. It's my grandmother. I felt her presence. I really felt my mother's presence. I cannot explain that. And I just started weeping. And then as abruptly as it came to me, it was gone. And I never forgot that. So I think it was my grandmother that was visiting me. I really do. Because I can kind of remember the woman, what she looked like, shadowy. But I remember enough of her that it looked like her from pictures I've seen. So that's a ghost story, kind of, and some spiritual connections with your family that we have. They'll always be our family, I think, So there's that one, and there was another one. All right, yeah, all right, I remembered it. This one happened when I was in Albuquerque, New Mexico still. And I think I was a couple years older, maybe 3 years older. After that occurrence with whoever it was, I believe it was my dear grandma Ata that was visiting me, which upset me ultimately because it's just not natural, Yeah, all right, I'm not going to retell that one. But I had something else happen. I'll never forget this. I remember I was sleeping on my bed, and it was the same house, and I remember the road. It was Del Mar Road in Albuquerque, New Mexico. That's where we lived. And this is about maybe 3 years later after that. So now I'm about 5 years old. And I'm laying there at night, and I'm awake, obviously, but I'm awake, laying awake in bed, and there's a window next to my bed, right next to my bed. I could touch it, my bed was up against the wall pretty much. And it was dark out, and I would hear and I'm like, oh, I thought it was funny. And I went back. And then we go back. And it was like a game, which I thought was cute. Then I went like, and I hear back. And I'm like, oh, it's a game. And I'd like 1, 2. And I go 1, 2. And I go 1, 2, 3, 4. And I go right next to my head. I thought it was a game. And I'm like, wow. I thought it was cool. And again, I do that, whatever. Well, how long's that been around, huh? Drives you nuts. I did that again. I remember this. And I go, I'm thinking it's cool. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, who is that? It's not my mom or dad. They're in bed. And my window, it was where our house was. it was too high up off the ground. Somebody would have to be on a ladder to be doing that. So there was something I just remember laying there getting creeped out. It occurred to me, this isn't natural. And I just have this sinking feeling of dread. I got scared. And it knocked a couple more times, and this time I didn't knock back. I stopped. And I just remember, that's all I remember. I remember that I thought it was cool, like a cute little game with my invisible friend outside my window, and then I realized, who is this? You know? Because they were mimicking me. And they knocked first, and I knocked back. And if I knocked, just like I just showed you, they would mimic, like 1, 2, 3. They go 1, 2, 3, or da 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 da, and they come back 1, 2. And that went on for a little while until just like all of a sudden I got creeped out. I got creeped out hard because there was nobody outside my window. And there's no way. They would have had to have been on a ladder, and even though I was like 5 years old, I knew that wasn't the case. And my dad wouldn't have done something like, they wouldn't have done that. So I remember that. Something was messing with me. And then there was a house on Smith Street. And I'm pretty sure I told this story on here. But it happened to me when I was about 9 years old or 10 years old. And that house on 20 Smith Street, Sodus, New York, that place was haunted bad. And this was in the middle of the village of Sodus, New York, S-O-D-U-S, up on the shore of Lake Ontario, the American side. So, yeah. But this is in the village of Sodus. That's to say that Lake Ontario was about 5 miles drive away, I think. Has nothing to do with this story. But the house, I think it was built in 1860. I remember hearing my mom say it really was a 2-story wooden house with a stone cellar like they all were. It had a barn in the back with thick stone walls and a wooden structure above it. You know, a barn like you'd see with a red barn, really old. And we used to have chickens, and I remember that fell in on all the chickens. The barn just caved in one winter, like they always do, those old barns. But it was an old place, and it was nothing fancy at all. And that place was haunted. There was something bad in that place. And my father, who didn't believe in ghosts, he didn't. You know, some people experience ghosts, and unlike me, they just don't make anything of it. They say, "Oh, that's weird. That's as far as it goes." They may tell somebody about it, and that's about it, you know. And that'd be my dad. He believed in ghosts, but he didn't really have much to say about it. And but I remember even our dog was barking in our living room at the corner. I mean, the corner of the room. And there were no windows there. It was the interior side corner, not a corner by a window, but inside the interior where there were no windows or doors, just a corner with nothing in it. And the dog was growling and barking like crazy. And my dad's the one, he called the family and said, "Look at this." And we all came in and we watched the dog growl and bark at something invisible looking up at something in that corner. And my mom and the rest of us were a little alarmed. And my dad, I remember him saying, "I think we might have a ghost in here." And my mom said yes, and she took it more serious. My dad thought it was funny. Heck, he would. Like, wow, I think we have a ghost in here. But the fact that the dog's growling and barking at it, it was not good. It was, whatever it was bad. So I'm going to tell what happened in that story, but that's one where my father, the rest of my family experienced it. But there's something, I went down in the basement in that place by myself. And this is going to sound, I don't know how this sounds, but something happened down there when I was down there that it was so frightening, so bad, that I couldn't remember it. I couldn't remember it. It was really bad. I think it was a horrible feeling that overcome me. I never went down in that basement again. They couldn't get me to go down there. And I don't know what it was that happened when I was down there when I was a kid. But it was really, really bad. And unfortunately, that's kind of a non-story, but there's more to this. But I remember that, and I remember I couldn't tell you what happened, and I still can't. But I just remember trying to go down there again one time, and I got about halfway down the stairs, old wooden stairs and really dark, damp, and I got about halfway down the stairs, and I just said, no way, I froze up. Something happened. I don't know what it was, but all right. So the basement was off limits to me. Now, one night, and I always heard noises in there. Let me tell a little more about the house. Well, my brothers and I always heard noises in there. I think we all did. And it had a weird walk-in attic that was full of antiques. Man, some of the stuff we pulled out of that attic today would be worth a lot of money, or a good piece of money in an antique store. I just remember that. Really antique dresses and hats, and old antique records and Victoria, like a antique collector's dream come true attic, full of stuff. Chest of drawers full of all kinds of antique clothes and old antique toys, like from 1900, in really good shape. And that stuff was kind of worth money even then. But man, it'd be worth a lot of money now. But one time, and the family all slept upstairs, as I recall. And one night, I was up, must have been the summertime, because I didn't have school the next morning. And I was up by myself, sitting on the couch, watching a Kirk Douglas movie, Spartacus. And it was an old movie then. But it was on TV where Kirk Douglas played Spartacus. And so all these Roman soldiers duking it out with Spartans with their, these mass sword fights and that kind of stuff, And I thought it was pretty cool when I was a kid.
And Pompey.
And everybody is upstairs and they're sleeping. It's around midnight. My parents let me sit up to watch TV downstairs. So I'm by myself on the couch, this old school color TV's giant old console sitting on the floor in front of me, and I'm watching Spartacus. And I guess, yeah, it would be, the kitchen was another room. And the kitchen was a room that was like an add-on to this old house. I don't know if it was an add-on. It was a pretty old house. But there was nothing above the kitchen but the walk-in attic and the basement that I'd mentioned. So there were no bedrooms above the kitchen, definitely not below. So that was off that way as I'm sitting there, like you're the TV set, and over there would be, the living room was to my right, and the stairs going upstairs to all the bedrooms was right on that side. So I'm watching TV. And all of a sudden in the kitchen, I hear pow, bang, bang, crash. I hear a banging. I hear a bunch of glass breaking. And it was loud too. And I jumped up and ran in there and to see what was going on. And I don't know if you remember these, McDonald's used to give out these drinking glasses. If you bought a Coke, you got like a pint glass with like Tweety Bird or Daffy Duck on it. You know, these Looney Tune characters and Disney characters. And people used to collect them. And we had about maybe 4 of them. And the counter was clean. I could still see it. The sink's right here. I ran the kitchen. And before this happened, because I was in there getting something to eat, and I went back in and sat down, you know, got something out of the fridge, sat back down watching the movie, and I heard bang, bang, bang. I jump up, I run in there, and there was like 4 of these McDonald's, 3 or 4 McDonald's glasses that had been washed from the, the dishes were washed. I think my mother, she set them up on the far side of the counter up against the wall, upside down, if you know what I mean. And so they had about this much counter space. It's where the counter ended and the floor is down here and the wall's right here. So they were on the counter pushed up against the wall. Well, all of them were now in the middle of the kitchen floor, smashed to bits. All of them. They weren't on the edge of the counter. They were on the very far side up against the wall. And somehow they'd gone off the counter and all of them broke into small pieces. Enough it made a lot of noise when they broke. And like I am now, I didn't just think ghosts. I didn't get spooked out. Because I'm really slow sometimes. Because I should have freaked out right then and there, but I didn't. I'm like, wow, how'd that happen? But I wanted to get back to that movie because it wasn't like computers or YouTube. The movie's still playing. You couldn't pause it back then. It was a station on TV. So I just swept it all up and threw it all out. And I went back in. And as soon as I sat down in front of the TV set, watching Kirk Douglas duke it out in the sword fights, with these Romans and all this, that movie Spartacus, really old one. I hear bang, bang, pow, real loud in the kitchen. Again, as soon as I sat down, as soon as I relaxed, bang, bang, pow, 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 pow. I jumped up. Now I'm scared. This scared me. I think it was just between the glasses breaking and now this, it finally got my attention. And I jumped up and ran to the kitchen. And like what I have here, you can't see it, but there's a chandelier hanging on a chain with like 5 globes with light bulbs in them, It looked like an old wagon wheel, but it had 5 light bulb globes in it, the chandelier. And it was like somebody had hold of the chain and was swinging that thing around and around, and all the light bulbs and globes were pow, they're just busting. A couple of them burst right in front of me. They were all broke out. It was making a lot of noise when they broke. Pow, bang. And somebody was like shaking this thing around. And all the globes, the glass globes, and the light bulbs were broken. And they didn't run into something was breaking them. Because it wasn't like they were hitting anything. This thing was shaking around and everything was just breaking on it. The glass, the bulbs, and the globes. And I started yelling, "Mom!" And my dad came downstairs. And my dad was a very, very gentle man. Very quiet, decent man. Boy, if you caught him on the wrong way. And I guess I woke him up and he had to go to work in the morning. And before I could even tell him what happened, he thought I did it. And I got my butt kicked. Honestly, he told me to go to bed. He kicked my I got a little bit of a beating. I thought it was unfair, and he said, "You go to bed." He was mad because he had to go to work. I got a butt kicking on the account of a ghost. And I was kind of mad, and really didn't think that was very fair. Well, that happened. So that was a childhood haunting. The other things I've told on here that happened in my childhood that I remember was my first encounter with the angels, which is story number 1 on this channel. And I swear I get more views on that than I do on this. On my recent stuff, people still watch that. Man, people still watch that video I made like back in 2011, I think. I looked younger then too. I was younger. But it's like this YouTube channel is like a time capsule. There was a period of time where I didn't post anything on here for quite a while. About 5 years after that, 4 or 5 years. So I told that story of the angels. I'm not going to recover that here. I don't call that's not a haunting. With God and the angels, that's not a haunting story. I told a story about hearing the voices from a doomed aircraft when I was about 7 years old, and we lived in San Jose, California then. And I heard them calling for help from an aircraft, only to find out that, well, you'd have to tune into that. Voices from a doomed aircraft, and to help us get help. And then I found out as soon as I got home that an Air Force jet had crashed in the mountains, and just then, and everybody was killed on it. And I always tried to track down who they were, and I just found out a couple years ago about an Air Force jet with there's like 6 or 7 servicemen on it that were killed when this happened near where I lived. And they were all killed. And it's kind of a psychic thing there, like with the Army men. That were killed on the vehicle rollover. I told that story here. Their ghost appeared to me, and they told me who they were. They actually told me who they were. So I haven't had anything like that happen lately. Those things don't happen to me all the time, and this is one of those periods in my life. Quite frankly, I'm grateful. So that's it. That's the childhood ghost stories that I can remember. I have a feeling quite a few more happened. Those are the ones I remember. And like I said, these things don't happen to me all the time. I had some stuff happen here recently. I pray to God for spiritual protection day and night. I don't want that happening in my life. So, I think about it, and like I said when I started this video, I tried to explain to somebody that knows me in the flesh that these things have happened to me my entire life, and they don't like this part of me. They don't believe in ghosts. They don't want to hear about it. I said, look, it's part of who I am. That's the way I'm wired. You need to accept that. This stuff has happened to me since my earliest memory, I told this person. That's what made me think of childhood hauntings. So, and that's it. Not much going on, and just like yourselves, I'm just getting on with my life. I'm trusting the Lord. I made a video the other day about blown trust with people versus blown trust with God, and I hope nobody misconstrued to think that I don't trust God. I trust God every day. I trust God's plan in my life, and that's one thing about this time of solitude and loneliness and hardships in ways that I've learned to trust God more and more and more. It has brought me closer to the Lord. I guess that's it for this one. All right, so take care. God bless each of you.